Hello, everyone. Mariana here with the Sustainable Living Podcast. Today, we are talking chickens. But before we get into that, I'm going to share some tips we got on our Facebook group for what to do when it's hot, hot, hot outside without using air conditioning. Today's podcast is dedicated to my Steemit friend Nate on Steemit. We had a conversation about chickens and how and what and, all of those things. And I realized that we haven't had a chicken show in a long time. So I noted down some stuff to talk about today. But as I said, before we get there, oh my God, it's hot. I don't know what's going on in your part of the world. I know you Australians are going into winter and it's getting really cold, but we are frying here and had heat warnings, like excessive heat warnings until tonight. But it seems like it has been very hot every single day. Now, I know this is happening all over the country. I'm in San Diego, California. We have fires going on all over the place, but that's not just in California. Wherever I go on social media, it seems people are having the same problem. No rain, excessive heat, even in Sweden. And yeah, it's just something. Before I go on, I have this really weird cough and I've had it for a long time. I will try to cut them all out, but if for some reason there is one in there, please forgive me. I don't know what's going on, but I'm trying to take care of it. So, we have a Facebook group. You might know, you might not know. It's Sustainable Living Podcast. Everywhere we are a Sustainable Living Podcast. Not very, innovative, but I think that way you can find us. So the other day I posted, give me some tips of what to do to stay cool without air conditioning. And I got answers, which I love that. So Lorien Silverleaf said, evaporative cooling. Put a wet linen scarf on you. Good idea. And she loves linen. I happen to know her and she loves linen. I love linen too. It's not always easy to find natural linen, but it's one of the best fabrics out there, I think, for me. I just love it. Then Jacqueline Kim, she said, use a fan. And Lorraine piped in, yeah, use a fan and put your wet scarf in front of the fan. And I think that's really cool because it cools the air down even more. And Britt came in with the same idea saying, yeah, use a fan and just sit in front of it. Don't move. Way to go, Britt. Jacqueline also said to take a short cold shower that even a 1 or 2 minutes just to cool down. If you get super hot, makes a big difference. Another thing, again, with the wet linen scarf or any wet scarf, if you happen to not have linen in your house, is to put it on your neck. This will really help to cool things down, and your wrist and your ankles. That's something we used to do in Germany a lot. It's kind of a home remedy thing, and I'm not getting into that right now. But not medical advice, people, okay? Just try it out. Jacqueline also said, don't cook meals which requires an oven. Duh. Obviously, right? Because that will just heat up your whole house. Or even cook outside. This is a good time to use your outdoor pizza oven if you have one. They're so much fun. Or to build a little rocket stove outside and cook outside. Or don't cook at all. Do raw foods or cold soups, stuff like that. Very good ideas. With a fan, we also had Carl Altinger say, if you can afford to have extra water, put some jets. My pronunciation, so sorry, people. Jets in front of the fan. So he's talking about greenhouses here. And if you're a grower who uses greenhouses, you know that they can get so hot and then everything dies. It's the opposite of a growing house. It becomes a dying house. So putting some jets spewing out water in front of the fans is a good idea for that. So Trevor Presley is picking up on the shower idea, and he says go into your outdoor shower, which could be a hose hanging over a tree limb, right? When it's hot like that, a lot of times you have to water more often, especially in areas like San Diego, where we don't get rain. I mean, we do in the winter if we're lucky, but not in, it has been months and months and months since it has rained. So if we are growing anything which is not native, so we are considered Mediterranean climate, if you grow any kind of fruit tree which is not totally native to this climate, you definitely need to water. So one idea is to create your outdoor shower in a way that you water your plants at the same time. So then you're not wasting water, you're making sure your plants get some water, and so that's very cool, right? Darlene Sweetwood says swimming pool. So that's a time where we can practice the community aspect of permaculture, right? Create community, get to know your neighbor with the pool, and that's where you all hang out. Of course, you have to watch out for sunburn, and then and this is even better, if your neighbor has a pool with chlorine, you can tell them all about natural swimming pools and how you can do aquaponics and, clean the water with plants and fish and all of that. So it can open a whole nother conversation. But that's not what the podcast today is all about. So I'm just throwing it out there, a little teaser. Then Tiny Farmer San Diego said, plant a shade tree. She's saying it's at least 10 degrees cooler under our Chinese elm tree. And I totally agree with her. So I have one of those elm trees as well, and that one is growing in our chicken area. So I call it chicken area because they have a coop and a roosting box, and they have egg-laying boxes, and then they have like this whole area where they get to run around and be happy. I hope they are happy. I think they're happy. They look happy. And one of the things in there is a big elm tree. So actually, just as a aside, I did a little video, and just so you know, I have a smartphone, which is smarter than me. And that's all I have for videos. I'm not talented in video editing either. So I will put this video up on our Sustainable Living channel, but don't expect like one of those professional, wonderful videos, okay? But it gives you an idea what things are looking like. So back to the tree. In the wintertime, oh my God, now how to pronounce that word? Pollard, I think. It's Pollard. That means you just cut off the tree. So it's just a stump. And the reason we do that, actually two reasons, couple of reasons. Here we go. One is it gives us firewood. The other one is that tree would get really, really, really big. And there's already a pecan tree growing next to it and a mulberry tree and all kinds of trees. And when we first got onto the property, it was a big, big mess of trees all growing into each other and killing each other. So we started to pollard said elm tree to give the pecan tree more space to do its things and to give us nuts, which we love to eat, right? But also to create more sunshine coming into the chicken space in the wintertime when they don't need all the shade. And then the third reason is it's a ready supply of firewood, especially good for people which have rocket stoves and use that technology, because obviously if you do it every year, they're not growing huge limbs. But So last time we just didn't get around to cut it down, so it grew for 2 or maybe even 3 years, and we got some pretty good size, like arm thickness type of wood for firewood. So something to consider. So this leads us into the whole chicken theme of the day. And again, it's inspired by Nate, who was asking questions about what is better. Is it better to get baby chicks? Is it better to get already adult chicks? So before I get into that, I want to tell you that, I didn't study chicken philosophy or chicken anything in a 4-year university. So I'm not a super expert. I have had my own backyard flock now for probably, I want to say 8 years off and on. Maybe it's 7 years. Time is one of those things. It becomes very fluid. I have been taking a university course. It was part of the mock initiative, or is part of the mock initiative, MOOC, which stands for Massive Open Online Courses. So a lot of universities have gone to produce these really high quality courses. Their professors are teaching, and they're available to the public for free. So I came across that one when I was taking another chicken course I'm going to tell you about in a second. And it's put on by the University of Edinburgh. And I might pronounce that wrong, but you know me and my pronunciation, right? And as I was looking for the link to be able to put in the show notes, I found out that another one is starting on August 20th. So it's right around the corner. All of you which are, planning on having chickens, or even if you already have a flock, I highly, highly recommend to take that course. I learned so much from it. It was really fantastic. And the course I was taking at the time when I found about this course, so course leads to courses. This is just how life goes. I don't even know how many courses I have signed up for. I still need to take. I'm sure you all are better than me, and immediately take all your courses and take in all that learning and not just sign up for it. But that one I finished, and I actually think I want to take it again because, sometimes when you do something like go over material more than once, there are just other aspects you overlooked the first time, or maybe it was some which was so unfamiliar that it didn't click, all of that. So I'm definitely thinking I'm going to take it again. It opens August 20th, and I will sign up. So the course I was taking at the time was by Patricia Foreman, or Pat Foreman. She is an author. She wrote City Chicks, among other books. And I first came across her at the very, very first Permaculture Voices conference in Temecula. I went to her session, which was an hour and a half session, I believe. And at that time, I was already a chicken owner and had read things and, done the little free courses which were offered here and there. In that 1.5 hour in her presentation, I learned more about chicken keeping than I had learned from everything else together. And I just loved how she's approaching it. And you can just tell how much she cares for chickens. Now, she has a background in, she was a pharmacist, I believe, and she also studied animal behavior. And chickens are something which are endlessly fascinating to her. And having had chickens now, I absolutely understand why. Actually, at the time when I was taking the course, I asked her to come on the podcast, and she said yes. We were still really, really new to podcasting at the time, and I didn't want her to come on when we had just a handful of listeners. So now that has changed, and I'm definitely going to have her on, and you will get to hear her and get all that information from her. She is also, so the course she was teaching was a backyard chicken keeper certification course, which I have done a couple of the classes. There, I didn't look it up, but if I remember right, it's either 8 or 10 classes. If you take them all, it leads up to you getting that certificate. If you have taken all the classes, you're very knowledgeable indeed. And just meeting the other chicken enthusiasts in the class is well worth it. I have friends, Karen Johnston, shout out to you, ever since. And Karen was on a podcast before as well. She does heritage chickens, and man, she knows so much. It's really fantastic. It's together we can really support each other and learn so much from each other. I really, really love that. So the website is chickensandyou.com. She's also the founder of a nonprofit, which is all about helping people to have backyard poultry like people used to have. Now, that said, there's a lot of information online, and I just want to give you a little bit of caution. Actually, Joel Salatin, when he was on our podcast, he was giving that advice to look how long that expert has been doing that topic they're claiming to be experts of. The reason I say that, there are some people which have been very good in marketing and production and so forth, and they have said that they're experts with very little experience. So some of the information out there you just need to be a little bit careful about, including what I'm telling you, because I only know what I know. So there's so much more to know out there. So always make your own decisions, figure out what is right for you, what works for you. Finally, on to choosing how to start out as a chicken keeper. And so much of that has to do with what are your needs, what is your environment, what is it you're facing, what is your wanted outcome. So here are the choices to start out with, right? You can start out with adult hens you purchase or get from somewhere. You can start out with day-old baby chicks you purchased or get from someone. Or you can start out with fertile eggs you hatch yourself. So first, let's go into getting an adult chicken and why you would want to do that. One of the reasons you might want to do that is if you want to have eggs right now. And that's, I think, the reason for most people. They get into wanting chickens and wanting to try out. They're not sure, if they're ready to have the commitment to dealing with little chickens, and they want to see what it's like. And they want some eggs right now. So that way you would try to find an adult chicken to purchase. Of course, purchasing an adult is more expensive than getting a baby chick. That makes sense, right? I mean, somebody had to feed that bird, so you need to pay for all the food they have eaten up to that time you're bringing it home, plus they occupied some real estate, which could have been used for something else. So that's basically why adult chickens usually run between $25 and $30, which, is not that much considering that somebody had to care for them for this time. Now, in San Diego, if you buy backyard type of organic permaculture eggs, they easily cost you $8 a dozen. In the stores, I really don't know exactly what they cost because I don't go there. Now, I'm assuming that $8 is high for most of the other areas of the country just because the cost of living is very high here. But let's say it's $5. So by the time that chicken has laid 6 dozens, right, then it would have paid for itself. So that's after about 3 months, a little bit less than 3 months, depending what kind of breed of chicken you got, you now are running a profit if you want to look at it from just money. But really, if you have ever had an egg from a chicken which was free to eat all kinds of stuff, including bugs and weeds and, whatever, compared to an egg you buy in a store, you know it's a difference. I mean, there's just no way you ever want to go back to anything else. So just saying, there is a huge difference. So it's not just all about money, right? Now, an older chicken, of course, is not as sensitive as a baby chick, and they're more able to withstand different weather conditions and so forth. No matter what you get, you need to give your chicken an area or protection appropriately to where you're living. Now, if you're in a city like me, there is probably not as much predator pressure, but actually I'm not quite in the city. I'm a little bit, well, let's put it this way. San Diego is different anyways because we have so many canyons where so much wildlife can roam. And I have seen raccoons, I have seen coyotes, lots of possums come through the yard, and all of them, every single one of them likes to eat chickens. I also have seen hogs taking away some chickens. Now, those were babies, so that probably an adult chicken, not so easily, depending on the size of the hog. So you have to think about what is, or it could even be your neighbor's dog coming over and killing them. And even small dogs can do that. That happened to a friend of mine. The neighbor has a small little yappy dog, and that one came in and has already gotten 2 or 3 chickens of hers. That means you need to build a good fence. You need to give them shelter. They need water, all of that. If you live in a cold climate, obviously your winter preparation needs to be much different from us living in a climate where it never goes below freezing. So those are all things to consider. Depending on the time of the year where you're getting your chickens, how much you need to be prepared. Advantage of the big chicken, they are not as sensitive. They will give you eggs right away. Oh, another advantage is that you know that you're getting a hen. Because when you get little ones, that's not so clear always. Now, before I tell you about little ones, let me tell you this. I was just editing this podcast and realized that somehow, probably to erase one of those pesky coughs I have been having, I erased the whole segment on what to do with little chickens. The choice of a podcaster, what can I say? Anyways, I'm going to tell you all about it again. But my brain is not working all that great. So chances are that you might have a little bit double up conversation in the remainder of the podcast. Here we go. Many people like to start out with day-old chickens. One of the great advantages of having day-old ones is that you probably have a much bigger choice in what kind of variety you can get for your place than you have by trying to purchase a full-grown chicken. There are different ways to go about this. One of them is to go and order the baby chicks by mail from an hatchery. There are many different hatcheries out there. Some are very big and some are not so big. Some specialize in heritage birds. And now we're coming to this whole thing that I don't remember if I told you about heritage birds or not. So I will. I will do it again. So if it's double, I know I should know. I just listened to the whole thing. But sometimes brains, it's hot. Did I tell you it's hot? So forgive me. Anyways, a heritage bird is a bird which was a breed before 1950, I believe. But the best is to listen to the podcast with Karen Johnston, because that is where we talk about that a lot. She is really into heritage birds. So some of the hatcheries are very big, others are small. And if the rarer the breed is, the more you're going to pay for the day-old chicken. If you order them by mail, they usually have a minimum of, I believe, 25 birds because they have a certain box size where those birds are so tight in the box that they're not moving around too much during the shipping process and are not so much in danger of getting hurt. One thing you want to do is to alert your post office that you're expecting shipment of live creatures and that they call you right away when your package arrives. You don't want them to sit somewhere where it's hot or have to be in the package any longer than necessary. So people like Karen are not going to even mail them out to you. You either have to go and pick them up, or sometimes she's meeting people if she's already on her way to somewhere. In that case, your selection is, of course, more limited to what is local. But if you pick up your birds yourself, obviously they have the least amount of stress. When you get catalogs and look at all those different breeds which are available, you have to be really, really careful so you don't get chicken crazy. It's unbelievable how many different breeds there are and how, oh man, colors and everything. And it's so easy to go like, oh, I want one of that and one of this, and that one is cute, and I just have to have this one. So be careful. Don't ask me how I know that, but I think you can maybe guess. Yeah, chickens are pretty amazing. So the way you can get day-old chicks is from a feed store. There, your selection is probably more limited, again, too, probably more to some more common breeds because obviously they want to sell them. And prices will vary. I would think if you're in a more rural area, you probably can get day-olds much cheaper than in places like San Diego, which caters more to like the urban chicken crowd. Once you bring your birds home, you want to be ready for them. You want to be prepared. So you want to have a place where they can be draft free. And that is very important because when they're little, they can die. It's very easy for little baby chicks to die for all kinds of reasons. For getting too hot, for not drinking enough, for getting into a draft, and very much so for getting too cold. Baby chicks can be shipped because they can live for up to 3 days without needing to eat and drink. That's a function for survival out when mommies are breeding their chicks because not all hatch at the same time. And so the mom doesn't have to make the choice if one is already hatched to leave the nest to take care of that one which is already out, or to have that one starve and sit on the rest of the eggs. So there is a period of like 3 days, but 3 days after the first one hatches, she definitely is going to go off that nest if there are any left in there to take care of the little baby chick. But this 3-day window allows for transportation of babies. So if you get them in the mail, they haven't had water yet, they haven't had anything. When you bring them home, that's one of the first things you want to do is show them where the water source is. Dunk a little peak in it so they know where it is, and then they will find it again. Make sure the container is appropriate for little tiny ones. If the rim, or I don't know how to call it, the place where the water collects is too big, like you would have for adult chickens, they have those containers which have a pretty big, I don't know what to call it. Dang. Anyways, whereas it's pretty big where the water is, and baby chicks could actually fall in there and drown, and you definitely don't want that to happen. If you only have a big container, put some marbles or some stones in there so they can't drown. always have more than one water source available. So if one malfunctions for whatever reason, the babies have another place to go to. That's also true for adult chickens. You always want to have more than one source of water available. They can survive without food for a while, but without water, especially if it's hot outside, not so much. You also want to have the appropriate food, and this is a time where you need to decide if you want to go organic or commercial or regular baby chick food. You want to be aware that most of the starter mix available, which is not organic, is going to have antibiotics in it. Just because baby chicks are vulnerable, and especially if they're raised or if they are in an enclosed space and many of them together, their chances of survival are just less as if they have more space and are not in overcrowded conditions. So first couple of days you have your babies, you might be okay with having them kind of in a tub of some sort, like one of those totes you can get at the store with a piece of paper on the bottom, because they're tiny when you first get them, such tiny little things. And a tub obviously protects them from getting any kind of draft against their body. A lot of people use heat lamps to warm up the chicken area or the baby chick area. The kind of common temperature is 90 degree for the first week and then going 5 degree down every week. That said, Pat Foreman has been teaching us, and it makes complete sense to me, that the lamps can actually be very dangerous because they can fall. And they are so hot that if they fall like on any kind of bedding you have for your chickens, it can go up in flames. And houses and barns have burned down because of heat lamps. If you choose to use them, make sure you have triple security for them, so that they are with a clip, and then you have something tied on so that if the clip would come undone, that it's still hanging by whatever you're using to secure it, and maybe a triple way is even better to prevent any accidents. So the thing you want to consider if you're using the heat lamp, they're exposed to light 24 hours, and that really is not the natural conditions of anybody, really. So one way to bring heat to the chicks, if you need that, is to have a heating mat underneath whatever container you're keeping them in. And sometimes you can even use some like a plant starter mat if you have that. And they also sell mats like at pet stores, which are meant for cats, I think, or dogs, to keep them warm. So that works pretty well underneath too. Just make sure that not the whole area is being warmed up. So if for whatever reason it gets too warm, the chicks have a place to escape to. Now it's a question of bedding. Many people use wood shavings of some sort, and Pat Foreman recommends to use aspen shavings. She feels that pine shavings have caused respiratory problems in little chicks. So we don't want that. So aspen shavings you can find in pet stores. That's probably your most expensive option because they're for some other animals and they come like in small sizes. And usually anything you buy is the smaller the size, the more expensive it is, right? I found it on Amazon for a fairly reasonable price. I felt better be safe than sorry. So that's the choice I'm doing. You don't want to use shredded newspaper or anything because it has ink on it and it can really make them dirty and you don't know what's in the ink. So yeah, I wouldn't go with that. So bedding, if you do start out with a deep bedding method, then they basically just do a little business in the shavings and you stir them around a little bit and you don't have to keep changing them. You can add a bit more. You want to be careful that your water is really secure so they don't kick it over and then you have a bunch of wet bedding and you definitely have to take that out because that could be unhealthy for the little babies. So I think we covered water, we covered bedding, we covered food, and we covered heat. The other thing is they actually can very much benefit from sunlight. So if the weather is nice and you have a protected spot, you want to take them out and let them run around a little bit. Soak up some sunshine. Start eating some bugs. If you don't have a mama hen, you need to be the mama hen. Another reason for baby chicks is that obviously they have less time to acquire any kind of diseases if you're concerned about that. Another part of taking care of little babies is that you want to check them every day. You want to pick them up, turn them over, look at the little behind, and make sure there's nothing dried up and encrusted so they can do their business freely. This can be a problem, and if they cannot discharge what they need to discharge, they basically die. If you find there is dried on, in the worst case scenario, it would be all plugged up a little behind, and you definitely don't want that. But if you see anything dried up close to that area, take a Q-tip, dip it in a little bit of water, and clean it up. And while you have them, then go check their feet if they stepped in some, and sometimes have like little pellets of poopy sticking there. And you want to clean it up just so they don't get a deformed foot or get a problem from it. The good thing is you get to hold all your baby chicks every day. And if you raise them like that, they become very tame. And even as adults are much more likely to be less aggressive. Doesn't always work. I had some little boys, they were little fighters when they got older. But for the most part, the more you handle your chickens, the tamer they're going to be. And now back to the previous recording. So that's common sense, and hopefully you have a chicken breeder in your area, and then you can go and actually, it's always nice to see, well, how are the animals actually kept before you buy them? Especially if you're concerned about, cruelty. There's so much about that out there. And again, about diseases and so forth. So when you have little chicks, a disadvantage compared to a big hen is that they are obviously more work. I just told you have to check them every day, and you have to make sure they have the right temperatures. With big chickens, yes, you have to protect them and you have to give them shelter if you're in a very cold climate, and you obviously have to give them shelter from too much sunlight too. But that's much easier than being so aware of the temperature for the little ones and so forth. And it takes you 6 to 8 months until you get your first egg. The other thing is, like I said, you might get a whole bunch of little roosters. Some of the big hatcheries, they actually have people which can tell if some is a female or a male. And you can get just girls, but I don't want to go deeply into right now what they do with the little boys, but it's not a good ending. And so those of us which are more on the animal welfare side, like Karen, she will only sell full runs, meaning half of them are going to be girls, half of them are going to be boys. All of them have a right to a happy life until their end time comes. And then they might have one bad minute at the end there. And if you're practicing humane methods of dispatching or harvesting the bird, they might not even know what hits them until they're already gone. But again, I will put a video in to the show notes, or a link to a video. Probably not on the podcatcher. So you would have to come to our website, and I put a video where somebody shows a very humane way of harvesting your chickens, where they actually shouldn't even feel any pain because they're, but that's a whole nother story we're not talking about right now, right? So the next choice is hatching your own. To me, that's probably the choice where you have the least risk of disease and stress on your chickens you're introducing into your flock. or if it's your first one, you want to have them as healthy as possible. So disadvantages, of course, are said it takes even longer because now you have to hatch them, which adds another 3 weeks to the goal time of getting your first egg, right? Then it takes more work because you will have to be checking your incubator every day, probably several times. You need a space where you can put that incubator. If you don't own one, you have to either buy one or rent one or borrow one from a friend. Usually, when I did the class on incubation, I was able to rent my incubator for $15, I want to say, and it was a big one which was holding 40 eggs. And then later I incubated some for a friend of mine, and I was able to borrow a little one which was holding maybe 8 eggs, I want to say, but that one I was just able to borrow. So once you get into chickens, you're going to make a lot of chicken friends, I promise. And so things might to become available to you where you didn't think it is available. Hatching your own, you definitely, no doubt, have half of them roosters. So be prepared for that. What is really, really cool about hatching your own, especially when you have children, is seeing a chicken come out of the egg is just really amazing. I mean, every birth is really awe-inspiring to me. And again, I lost a part of the recording. So here I was trying to tell you how to get free chicks. Chicks is by, if your children go to school, if you're not a homeschooler, enticing a teacher to do a hatching as an experience in the classroom. And then you will gracefully or graciously, that's the right word, that's what I was looking for, takes the chicks off their hands. Here you go, see? So anyways, having your children, and even this is something you usually don't want to necessarily do, to take the egg out of the incubator when they're ready to hatch. But I did that a couple of times for the kids and even for a friend of mine, to be able to hold the egg in their hand and see the chicken emerge while they were holding it. They all survived, so don't worry. It worked out just fine. But it was an experience they did not forget, something they're carrying with them forever. So once they're hatched, it's pretty much the same what you do as if you get them day old, same procedure. The eggs are probably the cheapest way to go. When I did mine, I was able to buy them for $1 a piece. Now, this is for barnyard, where there were just all kinds of different kinds, nothing in particular. If you buy breed-specific eggs, they can run a lot more too. But then the chicks are usually more than that. So this is something which varies from locality to locality, I'm sure. And again, it all depends. If you're wanting to have this really rare breed, you might pay up to $20 for an egg. More like $5 and $10 in most cases, but they can be quite expensive. If you're just like, hey, let's see what happens. And there are actually studies done, said backyard flocks where chickens get to freely choose to mate and to breed, end up being more resilient than the highly bred ones. But again, everybody has to make their own choices, what it is they want to do, why they have chickens, and what is the desired outcome. Now we have to talk a little bit about climate. If you live in a really harsh winter climate and you want to start with chickens right now, then it's probably a good idea to go with an adult. Just because when it gets really cold, it would be very difficult to keep them happy for that long. And there are some people in winter climates which start out with new chickens every spring and then send them to freezer camp in the fall. If you do not put extra lighting into your chicken coop, and if you do not live on the equator, where it's pretty much 12 hours of daylight and 12 hours of nighttime, you will, in the winter time, see a big reduction of egg production, or maybe not even see any eggs at all, because the light is stimulating the egg laying. So a lot of backyard chicken owners allow their chickens to have their time off from laying to kind of recuperate, to build up their calcium supplies again, and so forth. If your incentive is to have the egg production to keep it going all winter, you probably have to put in some supplemental lights. So the reason I'm talking about that is that if you have baby chicks, obviously you don't get eggs. If you have big chicks and it's going to become winter, then you want to think about that and say, okay, do I want to put the supplemental lights in, or do I not want to do that? Now, some people have little nurseries set up, and they might start, let's say, in January to do the incubation. So by June or July or August, they're getting some eggs, or maybe even starting earlier. But it really all depends of what is your environment like. How can you protect them from the weather, from the predators? I think that's all I got for today. I hope that helps somebody to decide what they want to do. And as always, you can find us or me on social media. We have a website, sustainablelivingpodcast.com. You can leave comments, ask questions. We have that Facebook group I already mentioned, and you also can find us on Patreon. And hey, what? You can support us on Patreon, which is even better. With as little as $1 or $2 a month, you also will see exclusive little lens videos I'm taking, and I take a lot of them of the chickens because even as adults, I find them fascinating. And right now I do have, well, they're not babies anymore, but they're still pretty small and they're still pretty cute. And if this was helpful or useful, if you think you got some out of it, share it with a friend. And next week, Pia is going to be back with a fantastic tip on how to travel in a more sustainable way. So make sure you tune in for that. Thank you so much. Bye for now.